the best advocate you could possibly be is a self-advocate. And like that is for you. Advocating for your healthcare needs, your medical care. I mean, you live in your body, right? Like you have to be the one that just stresses, this is what I need, this is what I want, and not waver on that. Hey everyone, welcome to season 3. This is Shauna.
And this is Rosalina, and we're your hosts for Too Young for This Shit podcast. This podcast is not just about boobs, but a journey with cancer. We are young millennials, open about giving you our raw and unfiltered look into our lives. We are in no way medical professionals, nor are we offering medical advice. Any medical references are cited directly from public websites or from our personal diagnosis. Some topics and stories may be triggering to those who are fighting, have fought, or have loved someone with cancer. Hi everyone, this is Rosalina.
And this is Shauna. Welcome back to another episode of the Too Young for This Shit podcast.
Before we get into this episode, we just wanted to remind everyone that if you like and support our show, just rating our show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or just leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts really, really does help and helps us reach more people. In addition to that, if you have the means, you can also support us by donating to our Buy Me Coffee page. You could donate $1, $2, or subscribe to our monthly membership. That's only like $5. So the link of that will be in the show notes.
We also want to remind you to leave us a voicemail. We've been selecting a few and airing them as part of a special episode during the month of October. This week, we want to hear from the survivors out there. Our question is, for you, what is it like to be a survivor? Or what advice would you give to those who have been diagnosed? Remember to leave a message by following the link in our show notes. You'll see a button that says Start Recording, which you can hit to leave us a message. We'll be back again next week with our final question for this special episode series. And don't forget to check out our very first voice memo episode airing tomorrow.
So for today's topic and today's episode, we'll talk about advocacy. And before we dive into what Shauna and I do besides the podcast, I just wanted to give a brief background on how the Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October has been created. Just wanted to mention that it hasn't started until 1985. But before that, people didn't really talk about their breast cancer diagnosis, their treatments, and just weren't really open about it until 1974. And that was when Betty Ford, who is the First Lady, she was the first person who had the platform and was openly talking about her journey with the illness. So partially as a result of this increased awareness, it was the American Cancer Society in partnership with a pharmaceutical company that held this first National Breast Cancer Awareness Month in 1985 to promote mammograms as the most effective tool to fight cancer. And today, the month still remains as the annual campaign for charities, communities, and the individuals like ourselves to raise awareness, funds, and to show support for those affected with breast cancer.
Associated with the month is that little pink ribbon. We've all seen it every year in the month of October, and most people are aware that it is associated with Breast Cancer Awareness Month. However, not as many are aware of its roots and its goals. The Breast Cancer Research Foundation is the nation's first and largest not-for-profit organization dedicated to funding clinical and genetic research on breast cancer. The founder of the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, Evelyn Lauder, initiated the fundraising drive that established a state-of-the-art breast and diagnostic center in New York's Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where I'm being treated currently. Today, the facility, known as the Evelyn H. Lauder Breast Center, sets a global standard for cancer care, offering prevention, diagnosis, and treatment services under one roof. So Breast Cancer Research Foundation and Breast Cancer Awareness Month brought about awareness and started important conversations around advocacy. But advocacy can look a lot of different ways. For example, Rosalina, do you consider yourself an advocate?
I think now I do. It's just been 2 years now since being diagnosed with breast cancer. And I would say before that, I didn't really do anything that involves this month. But now since I've been 2 years cancer-free, I'm definitely more involved. And it's something that I am passionate about. And I think everyone has a space to be an advocate. And so I think that whether you do things small or big, it definitely makes a difference in a person, 5 people, 100 people, it doesn't matter. But Shauna, do you consider yourself an advocate?
It's funny because like even when we decided to start this podcast, I never thought I was technically considering myself an advocate. I don't think it was until like after we were on television that I was like, okay, this has now reached like a bigger audience and it is advocacy work. And it took me like it took me a little bit of time to realize that yes, I am considered an advocate for breast cancer.
Yeah, for sure. I think it does take some time. Like, we didn't know what the podcast was going to look like. We just wanted to share stories, and that was about it. And it is so much bigger than that. And of course, I could say for both of us, we're really proud of the work that we've created and the people that we touch. I think we are both advocates in this space. But Shauna, besides the podcast, name like maybe 3 things or 4 things, however much you wanted to share about your personal journey in being your own advocate in whatever you do with this space.
Okay, so my 3 things I think are I was asked to speak on the local women's wellness panel in the area that I grew up in. It was a friend who asked me to do it at her church. And I was like speaking with one woman was a pastor, another woman was a gynecologist. And then they asked me to basically share my story. So I'm in like this basement church talking to probably about 40 to 50 women. And it was like incredible. It was like such an incredible experience. I got to share my story. I got like really emotional doing it. I had everyone in the room crying, but I just remember like leaving and just feeling so fulfilled. And it was women of all ages. It was younger women, it was older women, and everything in between. And it was honestly just a very rewarding experience. And I was so honored to be asked and to be a part of that. My second is in August, I had a GoodRx article come out, and it was just about me sharing my experience with my port and sleeping with my port. And GoodRx is an amazing website that gives prescription discounts and reaches a large audience. So that was, I think, a really rewarding experience as well, to be able to share a little bit about my journey there. And then I think my third is that I was able to be there and support another young woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer, somebody that grew up very close to my house, like literally like a farm field away from me. I was friends with her brother, and she had messaged me in December of 2022 telling me that she was diagnosed at the same age I was at 32. And I was able to walk her through what she was basically going to experience in the next couple of months, and gave her lists of questions and to ask doctors, and gave her different information on different hospitals, and kind of helped walk her through the beginning stages of that part of your diagnosis where you're just it's such a whirlwind, right? Like you don't even know where to begin. And I think that even though it was one person that I helped do this for, it was still a sense of advocacy. Like I was giving her questions to ask that she could advocate for herself.
Right.
Yeah, so I do. Like even though, like I said, like we have a community through our podcast, but just helping that one person, for me, it is advocacy work.
It is.
Yes.
Absolutely. But like just helping out someone, regardless whether you have a platform or not, it just doesn't matter. Like you personally knew this person. I think for both you and I, one of the things that we share in common is that we want to help anyone and everyone that we can. And so if there's just that one person that you know that you want to help out with, we're going to drop all of our stuff and like to try to help that person. You know what I mean?
I think it's important to say, like, we have the platform obviously through our podcast. We have our Instagram account. I know I don't have a public Instagram account personally for myself, but you don't need a major platform to still be that advocate. And I think that, that's so important to mention. I think social media sometimes is a blessing, but it's not, doesn't have to be everything.
No. Yeah, I totally agree with that, because if it's not a calling to you, if you're not someone who shares really on the platform, don't try to force it. If it's not you, you could find other ways to connect with others through finding a support group or just the Breasties app. There's so many ways that you can still help out with other people who are going through a similar thing that you are. So, yeah.
Rosalina, what are your 3 things that you've shown advocacy work through?
So I would say one of the biggest things that I'm currently working on, and it's something that I'm really passionate in, and of course it has to do with my cultural background. I am Latina, and it's something where when I was first diagnosed, it was something that I realized that the Hispanic community do not really talk about. And I didn't want to be silenced. I didn't want to put it under the rug. I really wanted to talk about my journey because I think it's important. I think that people who consider themselves Hispanic need to talk about their experience, and it's not embarrassing. So for me personally, that's a difference that I'm trying to make in terms of the support and the education and the awareness aspect for people in my community. It's like the different ways that I'm trying to do it. So of course with the podcast, but also I have a personal IG account that is mainly focused on being a Latina. And so I want to showcase that, if I share my story, other people can. There are people that I've conversated with that do identify as Latina, and they talk about their experiences with me and that they want to share. And I just feel like, I don't know, it makes me feel good knowing there are people out there that do want to share their story, but just seeing someone like myself who have done it, who is like still doing it, just gives them the courage to do that is something very rewarding, I would say. The second thing to mention is, this is like a small thing, but again, you could do whatever you think makes sense in terms of how much you want to put in. So basically, I share on my personal IG account with my friends and family just anything about cancer and anything that I see online that's just like an infographic that could be easily understood. I want to help out as much as I can. So if I see something, I'll share it. And that's one of the things that I do. I definitely also educate my cousins. And it's something where my cousins ask me questions. And then that's just an open door for me to explain what I go through and what to do.
It's almost like breaking the stigma of not talking about it, right? With family or people that are like really close to you, or just talking about it in general.
Yeah, just taking preventative measures to make sure that you do know your body and to know when something is not right. And lastly, this year, I wanted to be a part of something else along with the podcast. And I decided to become a community host for the Breasties. And it's for the BIPOC community.
When are the meetings? Like, where can people find this?
If you have the Breasties app, if you download that app, you'll find all the information about the meetings and the link to the Zoom. And so you need to be on the app in order to get access to that. And the BIPOC meetings are on Mondays, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. I definitely love being a host because I get to hear different experiences from people who don't get the chance to talk about what they're going through, but also understand things that people may have gone through that I haven't gone through. And it's something that I really am interested in, educating myself in things that just because I went through one way of like my journey, it doesn't mean that other people have the same journey. And so I just wanted to educate myself and really learn what other people are like going through.
I love that you're doing that, by the way.
Yeah, it's more work, I would say. It's definitely something else that I need to think about and something. It's just about time. So I'll explain what is a community host. So basically, you are the leader of the pack for the Breasties, and you have the knowledge to be there for others and to learn how to take control of the conversation and learning how to create a safe environment for people who want to come on and talk about their experience. And so that is what a community host is. And if you want to become one, you can sign up. They do applications every year. So I believe next year in 2024, if you're interested, they'll probably post something on IG, and that's where you can apply. And you go through the interview process and they ask you questions. It's like a serious process. So I'm really glad that they had the trust in me to become a host for the community. Right now, I would say I have the time. And my boyfriend even asked me, like, you're doing the podcast. Do you even have time for anything else? And I'm like, yeah, I definitely do. So right now, I do definitely have the time, but maybe next year I'll think about maybe not doing it depending on what my time looks like in 2024. But yeah, that's basically what it's about. And so, Shauna, what have we done together? Can you name a few things?
Yeah, we've it's funny because it wasn't until I had to sit down and think about what we've done together. We've done quite a bit. This past June, we were both asked to be panelists at Camp Breastie, which was held in upstate New York. It's a weekend basically at camp. The Breasties put this event on, and I think there was about anywhere between 400 and 500 previvors, survivors, thrivers, caregivers, really anybody that has been affected by the breast cancer community. And they gathered for a weekend, and there was amazing events going on throughout the entire weekend. But I spoke on the social media platform about sharing your story on social media and the impact that that can make. And Rosalina, you spoke on the career panel, correct?
Yes. One of the things I'm passionate about, FYI.
Yes, you really are.
Yeah.
And that was such an amazing thing to be a part of. We didn't stay the weekend. We were day campers, but we got to see so many people in the community and share our stories. And it was just amazing. We're definitely going next year. Another thing we did was probably the biggest thing we have done. We were guests on the Kelly Clarkson Show, October of 2022. If you want to hear more about that, you can go listen to the episode we did in season 2, which talked about how we made it on the Kelly Clarkson Show and what we talked about and our whole feelings about being on it and just the amount of awareness that show created as well. I mean, that's daytime television that we probably millions of people probably could have saw that segment. And maybe that could have even made one person maybe give a self breast exam or make that doctor's appointment. Maybe just a small reminder that this happens to young women. This is obviously happening to young women.
Can I tell you? So when I was on the panel, Sandra, who I sat next to on the panel, she's a wonderful artist and person, but she actually told me, and this was my first time even meeting her, she told me that I think it was her mother-in-law or someone who's connected with her saw our Kelly Clarkson show and raved about it. And I don't know, I thought that was so cool. And it was before I actually got on to talk on the panel. So it was a nice boost, I would say.
Definitely.
When she mentioned about that. So I feel like people still talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, remember, we had gotten messages from women on Instagram being I watched your segment. Your story is incredible. Love what you're doing. And it was such a nice, people actually saw us, right? People actually heard us.
Yeah.
People listened to our stories. And that was shocking to me. I don't think I understood, again, the gravity of that segment until way after the fact. But that opportunity came to us from your Be Latina article.
Yeah.
And just that incredible opportunity and just how many people we reached. I mean, an amazing experience. It was a lot going through it. We both had things going on, but I'm so glad we did it. It was incredible. Another thing we did this past spring is we were on the Brem Foundation's Check Out My Rack webinar. The Brem Foundation is based out of DC, but it's nationwide, and they maximize women's chances of finding early and curable breast cancer through education, access, and advocacy. And there was a couple hundred people, I think, on that webinar as well. And they also broadcasted it on YouTube. It's there for anybody that wants to go check it out. And that was an incredible panel as well of just survivors. I think there was a thriver on there. I mean, it was just so educational and it was just so important, right? Early detection and talking about doing breast exams and getting care. It was just such an important conversation. I was really excited to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I would also say that just for them to reach out to us, I got really excited when I received that email and I told you, Shauna, about it. And I was oh my God, this is so great. They want us to be on their panel. And I've learned so much about them and just about myself, of course, because Every time you do these things, you just learn how to navigate through like a webinar and talk about your experience. We also met incredible people as well on the panel. And I've learned so much about their story too. So I think overall it was such a great experience.
100%. I agree.
Yeah. So now let's talk about being real and being a public advocate with a platform. So I know, Shauna, you like to hide and not be on social media.
I know. I'm getting better. I am getting better, but I'm still one of like my big things, and this has been just in survivorship and like navigating my health and like my mental space has been like boundaries, like
Yes.
major boundaries with everything in my life. And it's been very, very healthy. So I'm getting better about being on social media and like just being comfortable being on social media. But there's still times where I'm very much like, I'm taking a break. I'm not going to be on my phone in the evening, or this is heavy and I'm going to remove myself for the time being. And I think that that's been like a really healthy boundary for myself.
And I respect that because I also have a set of boundaries as well. I think one of the things that people don't really realize about a podcast is that behind the scenes, there is a lot of time and planning and long hours. We want the episodes to be informative, to be good, and it just takes a lot of time to perfect that. And so, kind of going through season 2, I definitely would say that I did have a burnout and I needed time and I needed a break. But it was only until you're deep into it and then obviously going through all the planning and everything like that is when I realized in season 2, we're doing so much and not a lot of time to even focus on our lives outside the podcast. So I've learned that once the season is over, I need a long break.
And we did.
Yes.
We set like a date we wanted to start again. And I think you reached out to me and you were like, I need more time. And I was like, I am so okay with that. And I think it was obviously it's like better for us because then we came back and we onboarded like an amazing team right now. We have a producer and a great editor and that have helped like navigate us getting back into the swing of things. But that time off is what recharged us to be able to come back and do a season 3.
Oh my gosh, I feel so much refreshed. You don't even know. Like,
no, I believe it.
I could tell from like my body that like if I even thought about the podcast, it was just my body would just crunch up. And it's not something that I was never. I don't know. I'm still passionate about the podcast, but there's just like a time and place for it. And you don't want your identity to be around cancer all the time. I have a life besides the podcast. So there's a time and place for it for sure.
100%. And I feel you on that. I think our first year of survivorship, and just from talking to you and obviously through season 2 and now, and just like, I think trying to figure out our place in the community over the last year or so too, of like, we have full-time jobs, we have families, we have partners, we have other passions, and to have something that was like so centered around cancer and then trying to be like, I want to move on with my life. And I'm trying to figure out how I can do both, right? Still be present in the cancer community for other women, but also like not live in cancer land, just to not live in that place all the time.
Yeah, I think that it could be overwhelming sometimes, especially when we go to these events and we want to be a part of it, but sometimes we want to protect our own journey, you know what I mean? And we don't want to step back. We don't want to be in a place where we were a year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, who knows?
Right.
And I think that that's why you have to set your own boundary to understand what are things that you want to do and what are things that you can't do, because you want to protect your mind, soul, and overall well-being for sure. So
right.
Definitely it's always good to protect your personal journey and make sure that you're not doing too much.
And your healing journey, right? Like that's been, I think, very important to both of us, of trying to heal from the traumatic event of cancer. And sometimes we have to put that before the community, and that doesn't make us bad advocates at all. That's being self-advocates, and that's important.
And also, because the month of October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It doesn't mean that you need to do anything. I remember when I mentioned this in our bonus episode for the Kelly Clarkson Show, and I told you this, Shauna, as well, that I wasn't even planning on doing anything for the month last year because, again, I was listening to my body and it just didn't feel right. I just felt overwhelmed and it's not something that I really wanted to partake. But then when we got reached out to the Kelly Clarkson Show, I was like, okay, this is just this one big thing. And I feel like I can handle that, but not constantly do the whole fundraising and posting on our IGs and all this stuff. It was just too much at the time. But the Kelly Clarkson Show was just the perfect medium in terms of, we'll just go on the show, just talk about experience, and then that's it.
But do you remember? I felt like we did it. And I was like, okay, we're good for the month of October, right? Like as like a joke, being like,
yeah, I know. It's like, that's it. Yeah.
I was like, that seemed big enough, right?
Yeah. It was accomplished for the month. Yeah.
We were good.
I know that we've mentioned what we've done personally outside of like the podcast of ways of being an advocate. And of course, we've mentioned again and again, it doesn't need to be big. It could be like something small. It could just be something that you yourself want to do. But Shauna, what are other forms that people could be like an advocate that we haven't mentioned yet?
So this is my favorite thing to do. And in the grand scheme of things, it's so little, but can be so impactful, is I do a feel it on the first post every month. The first day of the month, every month, I put out just like, I'll find a funny picture on the internet, or I'll search the hashtag feel it on the first and repost somebody else's photo for feel it on the first. But every month I make sure to post it and just remind people to do their breast exams.
But you know how you do it? Because I'm going to tell you how you do it sometimes.
How I do it?
It's actually really funny. Yeah. You just write the caption, do it. But like, I could hear it in your voice. So that's why I think it's like really hilarious.
It is really funny. I try to find like funny pictures. I try to find it to be like, and the thing is, breast cancer is not funny, right? But I try to just maybe like catch somebody, right? Somebody who scrolling through the Instagram stories and whatever. I do this on my personal page, and I always post the how to do a self breast exam. It's like a Breasties post from a few years ago. I think they've updated. You always post the updated one. I post the one from a couple years ago, and it just basically walks you through on how to do a breast exam. So I do this every month, and I have had people who I haven't talked to in years that follow me that have been like, I love that you do this. This reminds me every month to check my chest. And it's just like, you know, if I post anything on my Instagram story related to breast cancer or anything, I always get some sort of response, like positive response on, oh, this reminded me to do my breast exam. This reminded me to schedule my mammogram. This reminded me to call my doctor. And I actually had a friend text me like a couple weeks ago, and she was like, I missed your feel it on the first post, and can you send me the how to do a breast exam that you post every month? And I was like, somebody's looking at it, right? Like that was one person that like is going to do their breast exam this month. Like, I'm so cool with that. And it's just like, it's so like, I mean, there's people that post Instagram stories every day, multiple a day. I don't do that, but this is the one thing that I do make sure to post every month. And I've gotten a really good response from it. And it's nothing nuts. Doesn't cost me anything to do it. Maybe like a few minutes of my time, but it is impactful and it's important. And I'm like happy to do it every month.
You know, something else that we haven't mentioned that we have donated to Pride Retreat, which is a cancer retreat created by Yahara Torres. She is the founder, the creator. The cool thing about what she does, aside from the cancer retreat, is this program called Coffee on Me. And essentially, when you donate, she would donate that $5 to someone else. And she even does like a shout out on IG, shouting out to the person who receives the coffee and who donated. That just makes a difference, and that makes someone stay. And that's definitely something that we have donated to. So I definitely wanted to mention that.
And we've also received that. Like we've gotten, each of us, I think, have gotten a Coffee on Me. And it is like such like a game changer just to be like, oh, that's like such like a nice thing to have somebody send you. Just $5, go treat yourself to coffee.
Yes, but then we also get to know who donated, right? So Macy, I remember, donated that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I tagged her. I was like, thank you so much for this coffee. This is awesome. It made my day. So I think that is something that you could do, you know?
Right. I think you nominated me, so thank you.
Oh, yes, I did. I did, I remember. The other thing that I did last year, actually. So, for the month of October, metastatic breast cancer is something that the community really focuses on. That is the type of research that we need to fund and we need to donate. So, I have donated to, I'm like blanking on their name right now.
Metaviver?
Yes, Metaviver.
I think also too, because it's insane with the amount of funding that we get every October for breast cancer. And I'm not saying we, as in the podcast, just like in general, the world, nationwide. 4% of those funds go to metastatic breast cancer research. And that is like despicable. 4% of all the money raised in the month of October goes to stage 4 research.
Yes. So Metaviver is focused on funding research for stage 4 breast cancer. So 100% of that goes to research. And that's something that, a lot of people in the community focus on and really push that for that month because it's something that it's underfunded for sure.
Right. And I think too, like maybe sharing nonprofit organizations that mean something to you. I think everyone knows the mainstream breast cancer organizations, especially throughout the month of October, the big ones. I don't have to say it. But finding like a smaller foundation that you are really passionate about what they do for the community and what they fund and where that money is going, share that with your friends. Because a lot of people, I think, in the month of October don't know where to put their money when they want to donate. Because a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, and if you are having trouble finding that, we have a list of all these different organizations that we support, and it's on our website. We'll link it down in the show notes. The other thing I did want to mention is that if you're still in the process or wanting to share your story, but not do it in the sense of IG or TikTok, and you're more of like a writer, there are definitely cancer magazines like the Wildfire and Elephant's Tea, if I'm saying that correctly. We'll put them in the show notes, but you can submit your story to them in their magazine. And I've seen it and it's really great. I commend everyone who's like an artist in that way of being able to express themselves through words. And so that's another way that you can share your story too.
I think one of like the most underrated ways to be an advocate is just being a good friend, especially when somebody's going through cancer. I think people just don't realize that that is also like an act of advocacy. Just check in, be that person that like brings a meal, or like if your friend has children and she's really going through it, just come over and, help out. And I think that's like not talked about much, right?
Yeah, it's not.
No.
Because the thing is, like, there's just so much pressure for this month. But yeah, just like reaching out to people definitely is something that it's underrated, as you mentioned. And it's just a nice thing to do. Just reach out to your friends.
Definitely.
Reach out to people online or people that you know personally. Another way that you can share is you can submit a quote through us. We'll link it in our show notes, but you just submit a quote and we'll feature it on our IG. And it's just another way where you can be a part of the community and just be an advocate in the community as well, because we'll tag you. And if people relate to what you say, they could definitely like reach out to you and all these things. And I feel like that's just a way to be there for someone else who maybe are not finding that same story or that same feeling or that same experience that this other person might feel. So submit a quote and we'll definitely feature it on our Instagram.
It's definitely like a great way to connect with other women that can relate to what you're going through.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing I would mention is that I suck at fundraising and it's not my strongest suit. So if you are interested in fundraising or helping us do that, you can definitely send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. I think that's something that we haven't really done. And I think it'll be cool to start doing that. But as I mentioned, I'm not good at it.
I think we've talked about it. We haven't pulled the trigger. I just think we just don't know where to begin. So if you do know, hit us up.
Yes.
I think I just want to end this episode of just saying another way to be an advocate. The best advocate you could possibly be is a self-advocate. And that is for you. Advocating for your healthcare needs, your medical care. I mean, you live in your body, right? You have to be the one that just stresses, this is what I need, this is what I want, and not waver on that. A very special thanks to our podcast producer, Bethany Allard, and our podcast editor, Ayla Anderson.
Thank you all for listening and supporting our podcast. Sharing our stories with you has been incredibly healing for both of us, and we hope it helps other women in their journeys through breast cancer.
Ladies, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and fellow Breasties. Help us reach more women by subscribing and rating us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at TYFTS Podcast and email us at tyftspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, so shoot us a message. We will link any resources from the episode in our show notes.